Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Susan Macbeth, the founder and owner of Adventures by the Book, and I'd like to welcome you to our quarterly Adventures by the Book Club. This one a Titanic theme because, as you know, 2 days ago was the 114th anniversary of that tragic sinking, and we have two amazing authors here today to talk about their books, one that's already been published and one that's not quite published. But we're going to hear their perspectives. Esteemed six Adventures by the Book Ambassadors who are actually going to moderate the discussion today. But I just want to remind you of a few things. You can ask your questions in the chat box, and we'll be happy to answer those. So just type them in as you think of them. You don't have to wait until the end. And I think that's it. We're going to try to mute ourselves if we're not speaking so we don't distract from the conversation. 114 years ago, 2,200 people were on board the Titanic. 1,635 people died and 710 people survived. You know, I didn't check the math on that. I'm relying on ChatGPT. So it sunk in 2 hours and 40 minutes. And here we are 114 years later, still talking about that tragedy. So it's going to be an interesting discussion. We're glad you're here for it. If you're not familiar with Adventures by the Book, you can visit us in person in Southern California. Some of our next upcoming events actually include Gabriella, who's joining us from Alabama. She's coming to Southern California, and we're doing a two-city Corona, California and San Diego, California, 4-author panel. So that's going to be really fun. But we also have virtual events coming up. Our next one is going to be May 28th, and it's a summer reading panel. And it's going to be one of our popular book bingo events. So be on the lookout for that. I will type in the link in the chat box as soon as I'm done introducing today's guests. But first of all, we have Donna Jones Alward joining us from Halifax, Nova Scotia. She's here to talk about her book Ship of Dreams, which was just recently released in the United States. I actually got to meet her about 6, 8, 10 months ago. I don't remember when it was, when I was in Canada, and we went to her local bookstore, and I got to pick up a Canadian copy and get it signed, which was really exciting that I got it before it was released in the United States. So we're excited to hear from her today. Gabriella's book is not released, so I don't have a copy of it, but I will show you the Star Society, which is her current book and the one she's going to be talking about in Southern California at our upcoming events. But I know she'll be talking about Survivors Guild, her Titanic book, which comes out, I believe, in the fall. We're joined by two of our esteemed ambassadors. As I mentioned, Marilyn Dashe is from San Diego, California. Simon is from Alberta, Canada. So we're representing one from each country. And I see in the audience we have guests from both as well. So welcome, everybody. Enjoy the conversation. I'm going to mute myself and let Marilyn and Simon take it from here.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Marilyn Dashe, and like I said, I'm really a Midwesterner from Michigan and Minnesota, but now I live in Southern California. So come and see us. It's really fun. Simon, you want to say a word, and then I can start up with a question.
Sure. I'm Simon Chibuk, and I live in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, in the western part of the country.
And here we are. So I wanted to start, and I mentioned it to our guests before I started, and I don't know why my thing says mute, but you can hear me, right? Yes? Okay, good. So yesterday, randomly, I got this post from the New Yorker that just happened to say that of all subjects ever discussed, the three that were discussed most frequently were Jesus, the Civil War, and the Titanic. So I thought, you got to be kidding. You know, here it was the day before our discussion. And so lots of people have been very interested in the Titanic for a long time. And I was reading about it right after it sunk. You know, just through the years, all the movies and everything, it wasn't all very factual, but it was done. So I thought that was just amazing. And I wanted to start just by asking you two, what do you think your book is about? Is it about the Titanic? Is it about something else? Just take it away, and then we can move from there.
You want to go first?
Go for it.
Okay. Uh, so, I mean, Titanic is definitely the drop and the historical setting. But as far as what the book's really about, it's really about, oh, Marilyn, there's my OUT word, my about.
Oh,
My
okay.
Canadian
A
about.
boat. Yeah.
It's really about friendship and what happens when that friendship is tested, and women helping other women. So it's a story of two best friends who are on Titanic together, and they're very different women. One is trying to escape the yoke of matrimony, I guess we could say. She's a suffragette. She's very sparky. And the other is a woman who is married. Her marriage is in trouble, and she's there to travel with her husband and try to save her marriage, and has invited her best friend along. I mean, it's you wouldn't think that if you're trying to fix your marriage, you'd invite your best friend on your trip. But the idea is that, you know, Charles is going to be doing some business stuff once they arrive in the U.S. So they're going to have what we would call a girls' week or a girls' week in New York. They're going to go to the theater and do some shopping and eat wonderful food and just spend time together as friends, because they don't do that as much as they used to. So that's kind of the plan. And then, of course, halfway through the voyage, a little over halfway, you know, everything changes. And the cracks are already showing in their friendship as well. They're carrying some secrets. And then I have some real life characters, like walk-on roles from people like Margaret Brown, Helen Churchill Candy, Rainey Harris, and those women who are already outliers that are willing to let these two fictional women into their inner circle and really form that community. So it's a lot about friendship and community, with this really iconic historical event providing the backdrop.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I read in your foreword or note afterwards that it started out differently, and then you had to redo it. So it didn't start out about friendship?
It did. It did and it didn't. It still had two women and a husband, and a plan and some secrets, but it was a little darker than I expected, and I wasn't sure about it, so I sent it like the first third to my editor, and by the time she got back to me, I had 2/3 of it written, and then she was like, so there's some issues, and she sent me a big long email, and I started to panic, and I was like, can it be fixed? Like, can I revise it, or should I start over? And then she sent another long email, and I was like, okay, I just need to start over. So I told her I was gonna start over, and I did. I saved like 4,000 words, which was basically the description of the ship, and then I just started everything else over again.
Wow! So you
once I did that, it came together really quickly.
Because it wasn't focused on the women then so much as it is now, or it wasn't as character driven, or was it?
It was, but the plot for the characters was okay. So my editor, this God lover, I mention this every time, and she probably hates me by now, but she called it misery lit. Like, it was just so the Titanic's already dark, and then that plot line was also pretty grim, and she's like, it's just too dark, Donna. It's not you. And then, you know, I did panic a bit, but then, you know, after I caught my breath again, I just felt relieved. And so I was like, oh yeah, this is the right decision. So while it wasn't fun to have to go back to the beginning, it was the right call. And the book, once I had the right characters and everything sort of fell into place, it came together much easier.
And it wasn't as dark then. I mean, no. I mean, this one to me has a lot of hope at the end.
Yeah, and it is about. I mean, it's the Titanic. There's tragedy built in, right. But I really think it's about how women help each other and how they move on and how they deal with things and how friendships survive and I had a lot of fun playing with that. A lot of fun. female
cool.
community is big for me right now. So that was that made me real happy.
So Gabriella, is yours about the Titanic?
So mine is a little bit more about the aftermath of the Titanic. So chapters 1 and 2 are aboard the Titanic, and everything else takes
Oh,
place after. Because I was very curious about the after, because we have so many stories set during or before or leading up to it, and the Titanic is the big moment. So I was very curious about the after because I had learned that there were a number of Lebanese immigrants aboard the Titanic. And my family, I'm half Lebanese. My dad's side is all Lebanese. They came to America around the same time at the turn of the century, not on the Titanic, as far as I know. Um, but I thought that was very interesting. And so I wanted to know, A, what is that story? Because I hadn't heard that until a very few years ago. And B, what is the aftermath like? How do people recover from this? Because it was just such a devastating event. And I am always very interested in what happens after. How do people recover for any sort of event? So mine is also a story about friendship and about women and about female bonds and how women kind of pick themselves up by their bootstraps and keep going. So there's one character, Marguerite, who is from a very wealthy American family. She is or what they called nouveau riche, meaning her family's new money. So not old New York money. Her family hasn't, been wealthy for a long time. They've just recently come into money. So because of that, the old New Yorkers kind of look down on them and kind of snub them as these kind of, people who don't really know how to use their wealth and they're just kind of flashy and not that exciting. So in order to gain those people's respect, the nouveau riche needed like advantageous marriages and things that would get them respect and get them titles. So she is engaged, not so happily, to a British earl, but she's kind of willing to do what she needs to do for her family. And on the flip side, there is a Lebanese woman named Nabiha who goes by B. And she's coming to America with her cousin to find work. Her whole family's in Lebanon. They've owned an olive grove for many generations, but now it's kind of struggling. They've had some family tragedies. So they're coming to America to find work, establish new lives, and eventually bring the rest of the family over. So during the shipwreck, Bee and Marguerite kind of end up surviving together and tasked with this baby boy who is not claimed by any of the survivors. So now they're stuck with this baby and they don't know what to do with him. And so in order to kind of figure that out and figure out the pieces of their lives, they end up forming a charitable committee together to locate this child's next of kin and to help survivors because being aboard the ship and surviving that tragedy has really made both of them take a good hard look at their lives and what happens next. So Marguerite's realizing, she doesn't necessarily want to be married to this man, but she doesn't want to totally turn her back on what she feels like is her duty to her family, which is to help them get established and to help them gain respect and, that security that they're seeking. And B is suddenly all by herself and tasked with this monumental task of helping her family and getting everyone to America and out of those hardships that they're facing. And so they're two very, very unlikely women. You've got one who's grown up very privileged and is kind of naive in a lot of ways, and the other who is a very hard worker, very driven, and kind of keeps a lot of things close to her chest and doesn't really want to let people into these very personal things that she's dealing with. But they're kind of forced to based on those circumstances. And so B ends up taking a job as the baby's nanny in Marguerite's household while she's kind of getting settled and getting on her feet and looking for something more permanent. And they form this committee with a few other names that you'll recognize. Kind of like Donna said, I've got a few little cameos from people like Emma Bucknell, who was a friend of Margaret Brown's, who helped out with a ladies' committee as well, because that is actually something I pulled from historical fact. There were wealthy women who formed these committees to help survivors and to help each other and to kind of lend aid where they could. So it's a story about that. It's a story about friendship and about immigration and class and just kind of picking up the pieces.
So they're very similar, really. You've got friendship,
Yeah.
you've got two
Right.
women, you've got one that's a little more, say, established, and the other one who's out to get the women the vote. And so it's really interesting because it would be almost like you can read Donna's and then get to the end and then pick up Gabriella's and see what
There you
happens.
go. Keep going.
They really fit together a lot. Simon, you want
Yeah.
to go on now and we'll go back and forth?
Yeah.
Simon? Yeah.
I get both of your both of your books have some commonality. Like,
Yeah.
the Titanic, the backdrop, but also, two women who are, from very different, very different perspectives that come together in the face of tragedy. But then, at the same time, both of your books also go past the Titanic, like that. They, Vincent Donna goes to, the Carpathia, the rescue boat that saved the passenger that could, but then also she goes beyond that and, kind of tied in that Halifax connection. And then, and then Gabriella goes to New York and, to, like she did, the committee that that they formed to come together and find these survivor families. I'm just kind of just wondering if you could both of you could kind of speak about your research and kind of, if you kind of uncovered some interesting facts that you didn't know about the Titanic or beyond before.
Gabby, you take this one first.
Yeah, so for me, I first learned about the Lebanese aboard the Titanic I guess it was about 8 years ago. So there's a group called the Southern Federation of Syrian Lebanese Americans, and every summer and every winter they host a convention. And so it's where all these people of Syrian and American and Lebanese American heritage, we come together and we basically have like kind of like a weekend family get together, basically. It's just everybody's there to have a good time, to celebrate our history and our culture. And there's always food and there's dancing, and there always are fun, different little events. And it takes place in different places throughout the US every year, so it changes. So in this particular year, there's usually some sort of presentation about Lebanese history, Lebanese American history. And so this particular year, I'm going through the schedule, seeing what all the events are for this weekend, and I see this presentation, Lebanese aboard the Titanic. And I had no idea that there were Lebanese aboard the Titanic. And so I was like, well, I'm going to this. And so I go, and like every historical author, I have my phone out and I'm taking notes the whole time because I was just so fascinated by this. And I learned that the Lebanese were the third largest population aboard the ship.
Wow.
Yeah, which is insane to me that that was not something I'd ever learned. Of course, I knew there were immigrants, but they're Irish immigrants, they're English immigrants, they're from other places, not Lebanon. Um, but they were. And so I knew it was something I wanted to explore in terms of the history of it. But I wasn't quite sure how. And so I just kind of tucked that away until I felt like I was in a place where I could pull it back out and kind of see exactly what I wanted to do with it. Because as I said, my family came to America around the same time. And so I thought it would be really, really interesting to see, what this kind of journey would be like to go from your home country to this new country for this purpose of establishing a new life. And then, of course, along the way for those on the Titanic to suffer such a great tragedy. And so, of course, not many of the Lebanese survived because most of them were third class, which was, the very bottom of the ship. They just had a really hard time getting out. Um, but there were a few who did, and some of those survivors' descendants actually go to these conventions. And so it's just really amazing that these conventions bring us all together like that. So I owe a big thanks to them. So, but in that research, I wanted to explore the aftermath, as I said. And so I began to kind of look up what New York City was like at the time. Where did these people come from who are on the ship, all their different classes and kind of their situations financially and socially. And there are just so many interesting hidden little stories about the Titanic that we maybe have heard bits and pieces of, but not everything. And so, one of those stories that kind of gave me the inspiration also for this book was about these two little boys who were Titanic survivors, but were not claimed by anyone. And they were like 2 and 4 years old. They were French.
Wow.
They couldn't identify themselves and say this is where we're from. These are who our parents are. And so a wealthy woman took them in while everybody was looking for their family and trying to figure out what to do with them. So if you look that story up, you'll find some spoilers from my book. So don't do it yet. But wait till after. I promise I talk about it in the author's note. I tell you everything in the author's note. But I thought that was so interesting. And again, just something I was not aware of, that these, wealthy women were, I knew, of course, they were involved in charitable activities and things, but I just never heard that about the Titanic. And Molly Brown was, very involved in that as well. And in kind of an interesting position because she was one of those new money women that I mentioned. So theoretically, that doesn't allot her a lot of respect, but because of all the work she did for charity and for women's suffrage and things, she kind of wormed her way into earning society's respect, even though she was separated from her husband and things, which, normally that would be kind of looked down upon. But she really, really was a go-getter and someone who wasn't going to let society stand in her way. And so because of that, a lot of people really came to respect her and welcome her into their circles.
Yeah,
So
that's
I found
very
that
interesting.
really inspiring. Yeah.
And I won't, Simon, I just want to ask Donna too. I really felt in your book like I was on that ship. I mean, I thought you just did a great, and I'm sure you all agree. I mean, the details and what they were wearing and how they got to eat and the china and everything. I mean, I just thought it was just amazing. How did you do all that research? I mean, it must have been overwhelming.
And I'm so glad, Gabriella, that you were like these two little boys, and I don't want to say anymore because
Yeah, don't tell us.
spoilers. Because if I'd gone first, I totally would have spoiled that because that was
No.
one of the stories. So I'm so glad you went first. Yeah, that's a really interesting story. Um, I did so when I was just thinking about writing this book, I was at my first Historical Novel Society conference. And I met Rebecca Connolly, who had written A Brilliant Night of Stars and Ice. And she said, Donna, you have to go to Encyclopedia Titanicus. And I was like, okay. So I went and there is so much there. And if someone posts something wrong or whatever, like people will very quickly correct them. Like people in there really are very, it's a fandom of Titanic. So lots of information in there about certain things. I did a lot of digging for what would the china look like in the dining saloon versus somewhere else. I've had one of my favorite resources was a book called Titanic Style, which covered all kinds of garments for all classes, from undergarments right up to outerwear, and all ages, so children as well. I loved that book because I am not a fashionista, but I love looking at it. I also love sparkly things. So thinking about the jewels and all of that. I loved researching that. But I think one of the things that struck me the most, and it wasn't really something I found in research, more that as I was writing, it was a realization I came to, and that was that even for first class people, most of the women in first class survived, but many of the men did not. Most of the men did not. And what struck me was these are some of the richest men in the world, and they were on this ship, and they're powerful and they're rich. But in that moment, it doesn't matter. All of their money cannot buy their safety, cannot buy them away off the ship. And that really struck me as, money in the end is not all that important. But then if you look at the lower classes, if they'd had money, more would have survived. It's so many weird little paradoxes in that whole event. And so I really had fun playing with those too.
And when you added in the real people, I mean, I read that I think it was Astor who put on his white tuxedo or something before he drowned. There was something that it's just amazing. And the first class men were in the same category as the third class, as the steerage people, right? I mean, they were the ones that couldn't get off. The first class men, yeah. So
it had to be women and children.
Yeah, had to be women and children. So it was really interesting, I thought. I was sitting here looking at the cover of your book, which must be Lou and whatever.
Hannah?
Hannah. Which is which? Lou must be the short one, I would think. But they have on the dresses that, just what you would think they would be wearing. I mean, it's just a great cover.
Lou is in green.
Oh,
and
I was wrong.
So a funny story about that, though, because I had to go back and rewrite the story from scratch. We actually had the cover before the book was finished. So there is actually a scene in the book were they dressed in these clothes? Because I could do that. I knew what the cover looked like. So that was kind of a fun little thing.
I did the same thing because I got my cover right before I got my editor's edits, and my cover is New York City, Bow Bridge, and Central Park. So I moved a Central Park scene to Bow Bridge.
Well, this
Right?
one,
Like, why not?
We have to.
and this one, you see, I look at it and I think, well, they're having one of their conversations. I mean, it just says friendship on that cover. To me, there's the two of them out doing their thing and no men. So,
Men. No men. Sorry, Simon. We get rid of the men.
Sorry, the men are gone from it. I was going to ask you guys about the male characters. Now, I don't know them in Gabriella's because I haven't read it, but I know Charles and I know Gray, So what, Reed, what can you tell us about those guys? I don't think they came off quite as well as the women.
I mean, okay, so on the ship, Lou has a love interest named Reed Gray. And of course, Lou is not interested in being married at all, but she's known Reed for a long time and doesn't really think he's going to be aboard. But then there he is.
There he is.
There he is. And for a bit, you might question Reed's character, and that's by design because, and then the other thing with Charles is that, their marriage is in trouble. And there are reasons. And Charles can come off as cold. I think Lou calls him a real stick a couple of times. And then I do remember one of the lines I loved writing was that she was like, "Oh, he's such a man," which made, and I really, that was one of the ones I hope didn't get edited out, and it didn't. But he was reserved and cold, and then as the story arc goes on, we start to see why, and hopefully Charles kind of grows on the reader. At least I hope so.
That's interesting. Yes, he would see what people thought because I wasn't going to give him the time of day, and then by the end,
I know.
thought, well, maybe it was in there all the time.
But he has reasons for being, and good reasons for being the way he is, and it's like he responds in a way that isn't helpful, but the reasons why he's responding that way are very relatable and understandable, and he's just not perfect. So I actually had a lot of fun sort of writing those two men and sort of peeling back their layers for the reader as the story goes on.
Well, and you do with Reed too, because at the beginning he's just the cad or he's just the guy, but then there's more to him. There's more to him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Simon, you want to go on from that one? Have fun with the men.
Well, I get the question that come to mind. The length that it takes for a book from research to writing to editing, all that, it's quite a lengthy process. And reading author's notes of historical fiction novels, you kind of appreciate just how much research and how much editing and how many people are involved in the creation of a book. But I was just wondering for both of you, how long did it take you to research your book, and then compared to actually writing the book and coming up with a finished product on it?
Oh gosh. Trying to think. It's been, obviously I went to that event forever ago. So I had some notes already from that. That was kind of my starting point. I probably spent about 4 months doing the initial research. And in that research, I kind of go to online resources, I find books, and I just kind of absorb whatever I can. I'm fortunate that there are lots of interviews from Titanic survivors that you can find online. I love listening to those anytime I can get kind of a firsthand account. So I did a lot of that. I took a lot of notes. I went to there was this traveling exhibit, it's probably still traveling around, called Titanic the Exhibition. And it was in New York City, and I will take any excuse to go to New York City. And so I went, and I wanted to go anyway, because obviously that's where the book is set. I went to that and I saw this exhibit that was displaying all these artifacts and, personal things from victims and survivors. And it was just really brought everything to life for me in a very visceral way. And then kind of once I have all that, I write the first draft. And throughout the first draft, I'm kind of flagging places that need more help. So like fashion, for example, is something I kind of save till the end usually, unless I come across something that really jumps out at me that I want to make sure I include. And so I'll kind of fill in those smaller details versus the larger historical pieces. I'll do that later. Um, and so I drafted it fairly quickly because I had a proposal already when I sold it to my editor, because that's kind of what you do. You write a little bit and then you kind of pitch the idea. And then it was due very fast after that. It was due in like 2 months. And so I kind of had to spit it out really quick and send it to my agent, and she sent it back. And then I made some changes. And then I sent it to my editor, and she sent it back to me. And I took out a whole point of view and basically kind of did what Donna did, where you kind of have to pick up the pieces and keep going. And I had to do all that in 6 weeks. And so that involved a little more supplementary research. So it was an interesting process. It was kind of grueling in a lot of ways, but I love the drafting and the editing. Those are definitely my favorite parts. So it was rewarding, and it was interesting research. I use this
Yeah.
website called newspapers.com, which is where you can go on and like, yeah, read all these newspapers from the actual time. And so I was just eating all those up about the reports and
Um,
all the conflicting information that's going out there. And it's just really,
it
really
is
makes it
amazing.
come to
Yeah.
life. Yeah, you're just sitting there reading a paper from 1912 here on my little computer.
Here it is.
Insane.
Yeah.
It's insane.
And realize how much they're actually making up alternatives.
Yeah.
Like, oh, the boat's going to Halifax. No, the boat is at the bottom of the Atlantic. Like, it's
Yeah.
boggling.
Yep. It's
Boggling.
crazy.
Donna, how long
Yeah.
did yours take? Because you had to redo it, kind of.
So the research part, I kind of had some of it done because there are so many intersecting points between the Halifax explosion, which came 5 years
yeah.
later.
Yeah.
So I already had some information that was pertinent to both disasters. So I started with that. Then I went back to the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic. We have a permanent exhibit there. Lots of books, Encyclopedia Titanica, newspapers.com, which is so great for rabbit holes and procrastinating. And sort of putting all of that together. And so it took me quite a while to get that first 2/3 of the book written, which I then curate. And then my editor was great. She said, we don't want you to burn out. It's okay. Take your time. We'll move it out. Like, they were so supportive. We just want the book to be really great and for you to be happy. And it's like lots of support. Because this all happened like in the middle of November. And I sent her the new proposals with Hannah and Lou probably like a week and a half later. I brainstormed, came up with that, sent it off, and she was like, yes, this is much more you. But then it's 2 weeks before Christmas. So, I'm not super productive. So what January 15th is, I have maybe 15,000 words written. So we're talking 4 chapters, maybe 5. And I get an email saying, HarperCollins has a slot for you for August 26th. How's the book? And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? So I asked for the production schedule to see if I even had a hope of making it. And so they sent it to me. So that was all the due dates, like when I would have to have the book in, when revisions would have to be in, when copy edits, proofreads, the whole thing, right down to when it had to go to the printer. They had it all blocked off for me. And I looked at it and I went, stupidly, I'd like to try. So I dug in and I basically wrote it's 105,000 words. I did it in about 10 weeks.
Wow.
I think. That was a lot. And then I did my revisions in 10 days. So by the end of, and then, and then everything was so rapid that within a month, I think, or 6 weeks, I had done like 4 rounds of edits. Like
Oh my gosh.
I would send it back, they'd do the next round, it would come back for me to read again. And so by the time I sent in the galleys, I was like, I never want to read this book again. Which is a lie, because I actually love this book a lot. But yeah, it went together rather quickly. So I'm very happy that barring having to do a complete rewrite, the one I'm writing now is due in a couple of months. And then it's not until next summer. So the runway isn't quite as short for that.
Yeah.
So that, I think that's a little more typical. It's really not typical to have to put, a long book like that together in 3 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. Listen, the book turned out great. I thought, like, I was really happy with it, but my mental health was crap at the end.
Yeah.
I just needed a nap and a juice box,
Yeah.
I'm interested in friendship. I don't know, this just the whole topic of women's friendship really intrigues me. And because my very best friend lives in Vancouver. So we've been friends since college, and you don't want to know how long ago that was. And so, just the whole topic, and you both have that, 2 very different women who are best friends. And how did you, develop that? What does it mean to you? I thought it was just so interesting. Of course, I know more about the Lou and Hannah one because I read the book. I haven't read yours yet, but
that's right.
Just the way that friendship held together, in spite of what was happening.
Yeah. I think for me, it actually ended up being really personal, even though I didn't intend for it to be. And I had some friendship things going on as I was writing it, and it turns out when I read it after revisions, I was like, oh, wow, I totally worked that out on the pages of this book. It's kind of funny how that happens, but it just goes to show that those relationships are important, and that people are different. And I think what's really important, or the point I was trying to make with them, is even though they're very different women, friendship survives when you accept the other person as they are, for who they are, and not the person that you wish that they were. Like you have to meet people where they are, and love them for it. And if you can't do that, then the friendship might not be as strong as you expected. So there's a lot of growing pains in there. But that was something I really liked digging into.
Yeah, same. Yeah, same for me. Yeah. I love exploring female friendships in all my books in some capacity because my own female friendships are so important to me and, so different. I have, high school friends and college friends and author friends and people I never would have met without this or that, and people from totally different walks of life that you kind of look at us on paper and it's like, really, these 2 are friends? Because we are so different, or, one of us is much older than the other, or whatever the case is. But it just really comes down, like Donna said, to just accepting each other as they are, flaws and all, and just the things you go through, I think, together as well can just really forge those bonds and those friendships. And you kind of realize, these big events, and big or small, they kind of reveal these little pieces of your character and your personality and kind of the way you handle things. And those are the things that you connect with and you bond with. It doesn't matter that, this one's from this place and this time and this land, and your experience is totally different than that. It's who you are at your core. And that's really what I think makes female friendships so special, because we just love fiercely, and it really sees you through thick and thin. And so I wanted to show, in this case, 2 women who don't know each other, would never know each other, would never have a reason to be friends, forced together by circumstances, and then realize they aren't so different because they have similar goals, they have similar passions and similar interests and similar hearts. And so, on the surface, you don't necessarily see that until you peel back all those layers.
Interesting. Simon, do you have anything to say on female friendship? Four-sided.
I mean the whole theme of character development did actually
Yeah.
kind of come to me before Marilyn
Yeah.
brought it up. So thank you. I mean, I believe the character development is a very important aspect of historical fiction because you want to understand the characters, but you also want to really kind of feel for them and kind of know that they're going to succeed in what they're trying to do or meet their ultimate goal. I was just wondering, like, what characters in your book did you kind of like writing about the most, and which character did you kind of have to write about, but you didn't really kind of feel that same kind of connection?
I feel like I had to write about either of them, but I will say I love Lou. Like Lou there's something about Lou. But I love Hannah, and I think anytime I write two female characters, I did it in When the World Fell Silent too. There are parts of me in each character. So, but there's usually one that I hold a little closer, and I think for me that's Louisa. Um, and then when I got to the end, and I had written the end, I was like, but this can't be the end. So there is if you've read it, there's a section right at the end of the book that is sort of a little epilogue kind of thing. And then I felt like I had illustrated what was so special about both of those women after the aftermath. And then I thought, okay, I must be done with these characters. And it turns out, nope. So I do have them in sort of cameo appearances in the next book, which is a World War II book. So they're clearly much older. It's 35 years later. I think when I start, and so yeah, they're a little bit older. Their hair is a little grayer, and but I really love doing that. So I think neither one of them were ones I had to write about. See what I loved about Lou? I loved her dialogue because she said things that most people would only think but not say out loud. And I really liked writing that.
And especially at that time. I mean, the things she was thinking and saying were not what everybody was doing at that time. So for her to stand up, and from what she came from, that family, which was pretty traditional, and she was a baronet or whatever. And interesting.
Yeah. So I think it was her. She was just saucy and didn't care, and I liked that about her.
Yeah, and kind of same for me. I didn't feel like I had to write about either one, but it was fun to write about both for different reasons. So for Marguerite, you've got someone who is very privileged, very kind of unaware of the way things are for other people and for, people whose backgrounds are different than hers, who has a big wake-up call in that regard. But, she's engaged to this guy that she describes as dull and a bore and things like that. So she's not thrilled about that when she's kind of this person she kind of dreams of this great love for herself, but is accepted that that's just not in the cards for her because that's not what her family has planned, and her duty is first to her family. So she's kind of accepted that, even though there's this part of her that is very much a hopeless romantic. So to see that part, and the part that kind of wishes she could be bolder and kind of, because B is the opposite end of the spectrum. She's kind of how, Lou is for you, where she says things and kind of goes against the grain. That's B, because she is someone who's come from this other country, has no idea what class and structure is like in America, and frankly doesn't care. And so here's Marguerite stressing the importance of society and the importance of, her position. And B's like, why? Who cares? Just do what you want to do. So writing that contrast and, seeing how each one kind of helps the other come to realize where she fits in society and what she wants. you see Marguerite kind of get a little bit bolder, and there's a rival family that lives across the street where, they've kind of always been enemies because they're both trying to get accepted by the nouveau riche and feel, or by the old money, and feel like there's only room for one. And so there's a son and a daughter over there that she's always kind of competing with. And so now that she is a little bit bolder, she's kind of stepping out into these positions in these places that are getting her involved with this other family and kind of realizing maybe they're not as bad as she thought. And then you've got B, who is kind of seeing Marguerite, kind of floundering in her world and wanting her to kind of stand up for herself, as B kind of tends to do. But then B also has to be a lot more cautious because she's realizing, and she knows, that she's a stranger in this country. She's not accustomed to it. She can easily get trampled by the people in power. So as much as she wants to kind of stand up for herself and does, she also kind of has to tread a little more carefully because it's going to cost her a lot more if she, angers the wrong people. So you see that dichotomy of the two kind of coming into their own and figuring out their places in the world and standing up for themselves and for each other.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Simon, we've got a couple of questions. Did you see in the chat? A couple interesting things we should probably address. I don't know if you guys can you see the chat? Yeah, because there's one about this life jacket.
Till the end. We had a couple comments.
Sorry, I just wanted to be sure we got to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So from Debbie, thank you, Debbie. And I don't know how to pronounce it, Titaniac or Titaniac. How would you? But as a Titaniac, I just really enjoyed the story and development of the characters, Donna, and I'm really intrigued by yours, Gabriella. Thank you for that, Debbie. Kathy wants to know what inspired you to become authors. Were there particular books or authors that inspired you, or who inspired you?
I'm an old dog who learned new tricks. So I sold my first book in 2006, and I wrote romance for 17 years. And so if we go way back to the early 2000s when I started, I think I would say Laverle Spencer and Judith McNaught. Oddly enough, maybe I should have known, and my learning curve is just really long. But my favorite titles from both of those authors are their historical romances. So, yeah, but I think those two were the authors that I read the most, that I found really inspiring. And I've been writing like all my life. And then I sort of let it fall by the wayside when I got married and started work. And then I had a couple of kids and I was home with the kids, and I got really, we call it here in Nova Scotia, we call it shack wacky. You can get a cabin fever. And so I wrote my first book. It was total crap, but it was a romance and I enjoyed doing it. And so I just kept going until I sold. And then just as we went into lockdown for the pandemic, I was looking at doing something a little different, maybe something romance adjacent. And then this opportunity came up to write historical fiction, and I love historical fiction. It's my favorite genre to read. Yeah. So for me, it was let's just take the risk and do it, and so that's how that happened.
Same for me. I've kind of, well, not exactly the same, but I have been writing since I was 6. When I was 6 years old, I decided I wanted to be an author, and I just never really stopped believing that. Like I was like, that's what I'm going to do. And so, when you're little, anything's possible. And then as you get older, you realize that's not necessarily an easy path. But I was always writing whatever I was interested in reading at the time. So at 6 years old, that was Nancy Drew. And so I was writing little mysteries, and then I moved on to, reading kind of middle grade, sort of like Redwall and like the Chronicles of Narnia. And so then I'm writing like these little fantasy kind of things, and then I get out to high school, and the Hunger Games is popular, and young adult fantasy and dystopian, and I'm just kind of whatever I'm writing is evolving with my taste of reading. But historical fiction was always in there because that was always my favorite to read. The very first one I remember reading and just being so fascinated by, well, actually, my mom, I think, read it to me. I don't know if I could read it yet. Number the Stars by Lois Lowry. And so that just really captured my attention. But then there was, a bunch of books by Elizabeth George Spear and like, Avi, I don't know how you say that name, but So all those kind of, middle grade historical fictions, Little House on the Prairie, all these things were just so, so interesting to me. And I was always reading those, even as I was reading other things. So I decided in high school I was going to kind of seriously look into what it means to write a book and publish it. So I kind of started researching the industry and kind of learning the differences between traditional and self-publishing and kind of deciding what avenue I wanted to try. I got to college. I decided to major in marketing because at that point I knew I wanted to try to publish traditionally, but if that didn't work out, there's always self-publishing. Because that's something you can do without, an agent or anybody versus which is what you need for traditional, so it can be a little bit harder to break into. Um, and I knew marketing was going to help me, A, give me a fallback career if writing didn't work, and B, it's a skill you need to be able to market yourself as an author and the book as a product, and it's just come so in handy having that foundation. So I wrote and I decided I was going to try, to write something, but I didn't want it to be historical fiction because that meant I had to research, and that was a scary thing. And so I thought, let me just see if I can even write a book that anybody cares about reading before I try my hand at historical fiction. So I'll write like a contemporary something. But I didn't want to write contemporary because I wanted to write historical fiction. And so I thought, if this is where I want to be and this is where I want to start, I might as well just start there and see what happens. So I graduated college, I moved back home and started working. And I had this idea for a historical fiction novel. Um, and began to explore it. And that became my debut, which published in 2021 called The Last Checkmate. And then Daughters of Victory published in 2023. The Star Society just came out in January, and the Survivors Guild is in September.
Wow,
So
that's
I am
fast.
only on book number 4, but but I'm
Well,
glad I started where I wanted
congratulations.
to. Thank you. It's
What
been
a great
Congratulations on
fantastic.
line,
making your 6-year-old dream come true. That's
I did.
remarkable.
right?
I did.
Like,
That's awesome.
so many people do not make that straight line, or like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
they go and they do other things and they come back or whatever, but like you
Yeah.
always knew and you just went for
Yeah.
it.
I
Like,
went
mad
for it.
respect for that.
I love
Thank
it.
We're
you.
That's
impressed.
amazing.
Matter of
Yeah.
respect, a little bit crazy, one or the other, but
I
And
think
thank you
everybody
for the
always
comment,
asks.
Rocky. So
Go ahead.
Rocky wrote that it's so timely for this conversation that she just read a life jacket worn by a survivor of the Titanic is going on sale this weekend in a rare auction described as once in a lifetime opportunity.
Wow.
The jacket, which is expected to fetch between $339,000 and $474,000, is the only one from a survivor of the 1912 tragedy to go under the hammer, according to UK auction house Henry Aldridge and Son, last passenger on the historic liner, which sank 114 years ago this week. And then Donna, you had made a comment about Lady Duff Gordon, and Rocky wrote that Frank, Francatelli was secretary to fashion designer Lucy Duff Gordon and was traveling to Chicago with her employer and employer's husband, Cosmo Duff Gordon. All three survived after they managed to board lifeboat number 1. Signed by Francatelli and the others who were rescued in that lifeboat, the beige vest features 12 cork-filled pockets of canvas with shoulder rests and side straps, according to the listing on the auction house's site. Wonder if anyone here is going to
Let's
bid
go.
on that.
let's all
Pocket
pool our
change.
resources
Let's
and
go.
contribute.
Grab the piggy bank.
Yeah.
So the funny thing about that is like if everyone in that lifeboat signed it ostensibly, there wouldn't be very many signatures because that boat is famously short on survivors. And the rumor was that Cosmo actually bribed the crew that was rowing the boat to not go back after the boat sank to pick people up because he just didn't want other people in the boat. Like it was a whole thing where he was not painted in a very good light. But yeah, Miss Francatelli was her assistant, and I actually have Hannah has a Lucille gown, so the one of Lady Duff Gordon's gowns that she wears on board one night for dinner. She was a very famous designer.
And the other thing I read that I couldn't believe was that there were a lot of dogs on the boat and a lot of animals,
Yeah.
which, people had them in different cabins, I guess, but some of the really rich people brought their animals with them. I don't think
They
the
did.
animals made it to the lifeboats, but they were there.
One Pomeranian. They were supposed to have a dog show the next day. They were first people and their dogs were going to have a dog show on the deck.
Oh yeah,
but
that's
that never
right.
happened. Yeah, and the rumor was that John Jacob Astor let them out of their kennel before the ship went down. Some people, sources say that that didn't happen, but that's always been one of those myths. That because his Airedale was there, Kitty, and Kitty had gone on the honeymoon with them to Egypt.
Oh yeah.
So yeah,
It's just fascinating.
Things that you learn.
Yeah, there's so many interesting facts, and that reminds me is that your book club can schedule a visit with one or the other author, or actually both of them. If you just go to our website, adventuresbythebook.com, you can schedule a book club visit with them for free right there on the site. Just pick a date and you can go into more depth because there's so much more conversation you could be having about their books, about their writing journey, about the Titanic. Thank you, Suzanne, from chiming in from Australia on a vacay. She loves these authors. Thank you for joining us all the way across down under. We're running out of time, so I just want final thoughts from our two authors. But Donna, when I was in Nova Scotia, you told me about the Halifax connection to the Titanic, which I was unaware of. Right. Would you like to share that a little bit or have any final thoughts?
Sure. So one of the things I love about writing for HarperCollins, I'm editor of London, but HarperCollins Canada has been my main market. And they're very happy when I have Canadian content. And what a lot of people don't realize is that there's a huge Halifax connection to the Titanic. When ships were sent out to retrieve bodies, all those bodies, that there were some that were buried at sea, but most were brought back to Halifax. Some were repatriated. Home, Astor, for example, was taken back to the U.S. by his son. But we have a cemetery. Well, actually, we have 3 cemeteries here, but the main one is Fairview. And then there are the Baron de Hearst Cemetery has Jewish victims. And then Mount Olivet has Catholic victims. And so we have that connection. And when those bodies arrive, when those ships arrive back, our whole city was in mourning. Like there was black over the windows. This was, and we only had 1 or 2 passengers from our area on the ship. One was George Wright, and he had bequeathed his house on Yonge Avenue to the local Council of Women. It still belongs to the local Council of Women. So that's sort of a neat fact. And then the whole method of forensic identification that they use with mortuary bags and how they catalog bodies and personal effects, that was brought forth by John Barnstead, who was a registrar here in Halifax, and that became known as the Barnstead method. It was used again during the Halifax explosion in 1917, and has been a forensic standard ever since. And I really wanted to be able to bring some of those really interesting facts to a story that, is so well known and so has such global fascination. And I was able to bring it back home.
We're so glad you did too. For those of you who haven't read it, Ship of Dreams, it's out now. You can get your copy. Thank you for joining us, Donna.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Gabriella, any final thoughts?
Pre-order the Survivors Guild. It releases September 1st from Harper Muse.
We'll be
if you
there.
like the Gilded Age HBO, but make it a little bit Lebanese.
Sounds great.
I love that.
I wish I had a copy, an advanced copy to hold up. But,
no, here I can show you a cover real quick if y'all want to see the cover.
Yeah.
The terrible phone cover.
Pretty.
Can we see it?
Oh yes,
There's Bow Bridge. So when you read that scene on Bow Bridge, that's what gave it to me.
There it is.
Very exciting. Well, I want to thank our authors for joining us today and talking about their books. We'll be sending out a thank you with a link to the recording for those who missed it, had to leave early, come late, who want to rewatch it or want to share it with friends and fellow readers. Thank you to Simon and Marilyn, our esteemed ambassadors, for joining us today. Did an excellent job moderating. Thank you for that. And Simon, have a fabulous trip to Ireland.
Yes.
We're excited to hear all about it.
Simon.
Thank you to all our adventurers for joining us today. We're always glad you're here, and we can't wait to see you all next time. So goodbye, everybody.
Yes.
Thanks,
Thank y'all.
Susan. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.